Ivan Miroshnichenko and Hendrix Lapierre sent back down to Hershey. And what is the future of Evgeny Kuznetsov on the Capitals next on this edition of Locked On Capitals?
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about what is behind Anthony Mantha's success. In the offseason, everyone said, get him out of here, trade him, he's no good. But all of a sudden, Anthony Mantha has turned into one of the better players on the Caps. How's he getting it done? A little bit later, we will talk about what is the future of Evgeny Kuznetsov. Does it look like he's going to get traded this year, or do we think he'll get traded in the offseason? We'll talk about that in the show. But just to get it going here, Miro and Lapierre get sent back down to Hershey. And just to get it going here, first of all, Merry Christmas to everyone that is listening and or watching this show. It's so great to be joining with you on this Christmas day. But to get it going here, Ivan Miroshnichenko and Hendrix Lapierre get sent back down to Hershey. And, not a real surprise. I think what it was ultimately at the end of the day is it was a good opportunity to show what they had. And all things considered, I think that Ivan Miroshnichenko showed that he has shown some improvement. I don't think that maybe he's necessarily 100% NHL ready, as he didn't necessarily pop off the page. And Hendrix Lapierre, a guy that's always made the most of his opportunities, but ultimately, what is one of the things we know that Max Pacioretty is coming back, Sonny Milano, and then TJ Oshie at some point. So there has to be some winners and some losers, but a really great opportunity for the Capitals, the fans, the coaches, everyone to get a look at Ivan Miroshnichenko in regular season action. And all things considered, thought he played pretty well, but I still think that he has a ways to go. Miro played 3 games on the big team, and all things considered, I thought he looked good, better than in the preseason, but appears to need some more time to marinate in the Capitals crock pot that is the Hershey Bears. And not to disparage the Hershey Bears, as we know that last season they won the Calder Cup, and this season they're knocking it out of the park. So a really great environment for Ivan and for Hendrix to continue to work on their game. Again, I would say right now, as I record this on Christmas Day, that Hendrix Lapierre is probably a little bit closer to being NHL ready than Ivan Miroshnichenko, but not to disparage even. I think that he is playing a big role. I think that he is making great strides. It's just going to take some time. I thought that Miro showed good chemistry with Kuzi on the third line, a good story of 2 Russian countrymen, as we know that Ivan Miroshnichenko was the 2022 first-round 20th pick for the Capitals, and he could have been drafted higher if it wasn't for his Hodgkin's or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but still exceeding and, far ahead of where everyone else had him projected. Some people said he's years out. He was able to overcome the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He found a way to terminate his KHL contract, came into camp, impressed. He is making steps in the right direction. In his time on the big team, he had 4 shots to show for it. Again, it would have been better, I suppose, if he was able to find the back of the net, of course, but making steps in the right direction. Just a feel-good story, though, as when he was on the team, he was always smiling from ear to ear and just very happy to be here. a great story about Alexi Protas and how he was interpreting for him and just the great chemistry he had there. It was a really feel good story, but a feel good story isn't going to necessarily win games. We need to see more from Miroshnichenko. And again, he's way ahead of where he needs to be. But to the people that are wondering why he got sent back down to Hershey and with Hendrik Lapierre, that is why, as they have to assess the talent that is on this team, especially since Max Pacioretty, Sonny Milano most likely will be joining the team after the freeze. And then, of course, like I said, TJ Oshie to follow thereafter. But a good thing, all things considered, Lapierre 2 points in 3 games, got top 6 minutes in McMichael's absence when he was sick. And that was a really good opportunity for Hendrik Lapierre to show what he had, not only on the big team, but getting big minutes on the Capitals. And I was impressed. And as Capitals fans, you should have been impressed. Still some young talent. And I think that, on the depth chart, they still have some ways to go to climb up that. But when called upon, Hendrik Lapierre in particular always makes the most of his opportunities. Caps fans should be excited as we should see Max Pacioretty for the first time and also the return of Sonny Milano. Yes, Max Pacioretty, the player that 6 different times in his career has scored 30 goals. He had a long career with the Montreal Canadiens, of course, with Vegas, and then a short cup of coffee with Hurricanes there as well. But, the potential is there for him to be a really great player. Will he live up to that potential? That is the question. So those were the positives, the 6 times, 30 goals scored. The negative, however, is the last 2 seasons he had Achilles issues, which greatly limited his time. We can't live in the past. We got him on a bargain basement deal, 2 million plus 2 million in incentives, that it was worth the gamble. If in everything that we've seen at practice, his shot is amazing. And for a guy that had Achilles issues, he seems to be moving very well. All things for me considered, I'm positive about the addition of Max Pacioretty on this team. I think he will be a great addition. I want to see if he lives up to the hype, as he was a player that was picked up in the offseason and is a little bit behind, I think, the projection of where I had for him. We knew that he wasn't going to be ready right out of the gate, but we are edging up right here on January, and he's just making his debut on the Capitals. So it'll be interesting to see. Sonny Milano, for me, has a lot to prove, as he has been a bit up and down. When he's dialed in, he's one of the best. But when he's not one of the best. And I guess that's not saying anything too novel. But Sonny Milano, for me, is a guy that's kind of on the edge, to that he needs to show more. For me, to get a sweater night in and night out, there's guys down in Hershey that are just waiting for their opportunity. There's healthy scratches that are waiting for their opportunity. And taking a look at what the Bears are doing down in Hershey, a lot of that talent might be better than what Sonny Milano brings. Again, I'm not writing him off. I'm just going to say that the Capitals need to see more from Sonny Milano. That is for sure. And then other trade chatter surrounding that as well, I've heard, is that Nick Dowd is getting quite a bit of attention from different insiders, that he could potentially be getting a lot of offers on Nick Dowd. So there are some moving pieces on this team. Also, rumblings out there if the Capitals would have any interest in flipping Joel Edmondson. So things, I think we're going to see some change as the season progresses here. I would not be in love with the idea of trading someone like Nick Dowd, but I would like to hear offers. But that is kind of the state of the Capitals right now, as I record this, December 25th. At 9:13 p.m. local, of what is on deck. We do know that Pacioretty will be joining the team. We know that Milano, and then also Ethan Bear, who we know is on the team. It was just happened during the freeze that they couldn't formally sign him. That I think that he will finally put pen to paper, and it will be official that he is a Capital, bolstering that blue line, a shutdown defenseman, a two-way player. A lot to love about Ethan Bear's game, and kind of why we hear the possibility of them flipping a Joel Edmondson is there is a glut of talent on the blue line, almost too much talent. And I know what you're saying, injuries, Dan, injuries, and I hear all that, but they want to get some return goods, and sometimes you got to give up something big if you want to get something big. So that is the rumblings. If you stick your finger into the air, Nick Dowd Joel Edmondson. Those are the names that other teams are kicking the tires on. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the latest with Evgeny Kuznetsov. Will he be a Capital for the remainder of the year? And ultimately, how long will he be here? We'll talk about Kuzi coming up. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, welcome back into this Christmas edition of Locked On Capitals as we are talking Caps hockey when there's not a whole lot going on with the Capitals as the freeze is going on right now where there can't be any big movement. But Evgeny Kuznetsov, let's talk about Kuzi and what are the long-term plans for him on this team. If you're an everydayer of the show and if you follow the Capitals, you know that last summer that it did seem quite apparent that the Capitals wanted to move Evgeny Kuznetsov. Why? Well, let's refresh your memory a little bit if you're not someone that is 100% up with the Capitals, is that he had a down season with the Capitals. Suffices to say, last season, he was kind of in Peter Laviolette's doghouse. He reached out to a couple different media sources. Well, some of them were in Russia there, saying that he was not too happy playing on the Capitals and he would like to be traded because he thought he was misutilized and underutilized. And then hope springs eternal as the Capitals hire a new head coach in the form of Spencer Carberry. And one of the things I had said is if there's a few things that Carbs could do would be, of course, get the Capitals to the Stanley Cup, get Anthony Mantha going. Check. That's a pretty big thing. And also to reinvigorate Evgeny Kuznetsov, and that has been a little bit lukewarm, shall we say. And ultimately, what is the long term for him? So the Capitals are in an interesting position as he does carry quite a heavy cap hit. Um, so that doesn't make him necessarily the easiest guy to move. He does have a cap hit of $7.8 million and through 27 games so far this season, 5 goals, 6 assists. This is not the guy that the Capitals signed up for. I know that people will oftentimes point to what he does in the shootout, and he is a master at that. I'm not here to diminish him in that regard, but we need to see more from Evgeny Kuznetsov. The high water mark for Evgeny Kuznetsov was the 17-18 season, and that season he had 27 goals and 56 assists. Now, so a lot of people were talking to me that it's not going to happen. They're not going to move Kuzi. It's just not going to happen. So give it up. But it was pretty close from the rumblings that we've heard from prominent NHL insiders that a deal would have sent Evgeny Kuznetsov to the Nashville Predators in return for Matt Duchene. That deal fell apart as we know that Duchene moved on from the Predators, and it does appear that the Predators are no longer looking for the services of a player like Evgeny Kuznetsov. Why would the Predators be interested in a guy like Kuzi that's a bit hot, he's a bit cold? Is that their GM, former Capitals head coach, Barry Trotz, is now the general manager of the Nashville Predators. And I think that there was a rapport between Kuzi and Barry Trotz. And I think that probably Barry Trotz perceives that he is the Kuzi whisperer. I know that he is the GM, but maybe he could talk to Kuzi. Maybe he could talk to the Predators head coach and say, hey, this is what works with him. I got some experience with him, and that Barry Trotz was able to see value in Evgeny Kuznetsov because he was his head coach, and that maybe Peter Laviolette and maybe Spencer Carberry are not utilizing him the correct way. That's not really my assessment. I know that he was once a great player. He rounded out the team top 3 in goals a couple of years ago. It was Wilson, Kuzi, and Alex Ovechkin, but a lot has changed. A lot has changed for Alex Ovechkin as well. And players get older and they go through ebbs, they go through flows. But one of the things, most players don't ebb and flow quite as much as Kuznetsov. He's the guy that said, if I wanted to be, I could be one of the best players in the NHL. I just choose not to be. That is not really a great comment. That doesn't, just I understand he's quirky and he's a different kind of guy, and that's just who he is. But if I was an employer and I was working with someone and I said, you need to work on this, and the guy that I was correcting looked at me and he goes, Dan, listen, I could be the best worker here if I want to be. I just don't want to be. My answer to him would be, well, then why do I want you here? What intrinsic value do you bring to me? Or in this case, the Capitals. I know that the cap hit is the tough thing, or ultimately, I believe that he would have been long gone. And we've seen flashes of greatness from Kuznetsov, but we've also seen him be a healthy scratch this year, which is a change for him, a kind of a shot across his bow. And what did we see when he came back? A changed Evgeny Kuznetsov. But since then, it hasn't been setting the world on fire. We need consistent players on this team to not be good on occasion. We need players that are going to be good on the regular. I'm talking Dylan Strome. I'm talking Tom Wilson. I'm talking Charlie Lindgren. The players that are carrying their weight and then some, not players that are getting lucky on occasion. You know what I'm saying? And, it is a league of what have you done for me lately? And when it comes to Evgeny Kuznetsov, he's just not been the guy. I think that ship has sailed. I think that he's not a horrible player. I think that he has some tools in his tool set, and he very well could set the world ablaze on another team in the NHL, but that's the risk that I am willing to take. But some people would say, hey, Dan, what about Anthony Mantha? Everyone wrote him off as well. I know, but the Capitals have given him, Kuzi, his opportunity, and it's not a one size fits all. Just because Anthony Mantha was able to find his way, just because he had that confidence, doesn't mean that that Kuzi's going to have the same thing. I'm going to just kind of contrast the difference here. Anthony Mantha and Kuznetsov, to me, seem personality-wise about as far apart as you possibly can. Anthony Mantha seems like a positive guy that, was down on his luck and, struggled with confidence last season and now is able to find his way. And I'll talk a little bit more about Anthony Mantha in the next segment. But Kuzi's a guy that seems to have a bit of an attitude problem. I remember that Al Koken was talking about, when you're closing in on this assist and it's going to be tying some record with the Capitals, and he looked at Al Koken kind of disrespectfully, goes, yeah, I don't really care about any of that stuff. So to say that he has a poor attitude would be an understatement. And I'm willing to accept quirky if I can see results. You can be the quirkiest guy in the world if you're scoring 20 or 30 goals, but when you're not scoring goals and you have a poor attitude, then it's curtains for me on this team. If you can take that poor attitude and head on down the road. And I wish you nothing but the best. I hope that on the next team, you get 50 goals, whatever. We just don't want that toxic environment on the Capitals team. And I saw an interview with Sammy Silber as well, where he was getting interviewed, and they were speaking disparagingly about his slow entry on the shootout, and he used a 4-letter word saying, I don't really give a bleep about that either. So, I think it's, kind of this bad boy image that doesn't really wash for me in the NHL. Again, back that up. Back that bad boy image up and get 20, 30, 40 goals, and then you can be the quirky, weird guy that you are. But if you just have a poor attitude and you can't back that up, that does not provide a lot of value for you on this team. And I understand he's here right now because of cap hit, that he's getting paid too much money and not a lot of people want to take that on. But I think that when the opportunity presents itself, and it might happen at the trade, it might happen, like around the trade deadline, it might happen at the draft, it might happen in the offseason. I ultimately don't know when that's going to be, but I think that when the opportunity presents itself, as long as it is an upgrade, I think that the Capitals should really go after moving on from Kuznetsov, because how many years are we going to look at this guy that's quirky? He's hot one minute, he's cold the next minute. I don't like playing here and I'm going to play good on my own terms. That's enough of it. I've had enough of listening to that attitude. We need more. The Capitals need more. And I think that the Capitals need to get more out of Kuznetsov. Otherwise, I could see him being scratched yet again. All right, so coming up here after the break, what is behind Anthony Mantha's success? It seems, kind of a long shot. I did not see that coming this offseason, but what is in the secret sauce that Anthony Mantha's eating? I'll talk about that coming up. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Anthony Mantha is that feel good story. He is the guy that struggled with confidence last year. He's the guy that hired the mental coach last year because he was so up in his head because he couldn't score goals. He was lacking confidence. So, what did he do? He hired that mental coach. He dropped 10 pounds. He said, I'm going to get on the train, this Capitals train, and I'm going to help this team out. And guess what happened? He scored a goal, and you could just see the positivity just overflowing in him. And then other good things happened, and more goals and assists and really great things. And guess what? When great things happen, other great things will happen because you're projecting success. You can see success before it happens. I think, like Alex Ovechkin, sometimes I think he sees failure before it happens, and subsequently, that is why he doesn't succeed. Of course, the last game that he played there a couple games ago when he got that overtime shootout, or excuse me, that overtime goal, that was a moment where he was confident. Despite the fact that he didn't have anything really great happen to him, he was projecting confidence, he was projecting success, and darn it, it went in the back of the net. Proofs in the pudding that confidence is contagious. That is what was ailing Anthony Mantha. Is I just think that he was, maybe not. Peter Laviolette was a rough guy, a rough around the edges coaches, seemed to be kind of gruff, kind of rough, and he gets results. I mean, the Rangers are in first place in the Metro Division, but he seems to, wear out his welcome in a hurry. And I think that to certain players, he's not the right kind of player, the right kind of coach to be around. It's a bit of a toxic environment as he is quite a bit of a sandpaper personality. And we saw that. And I contrasted that in the previous segment with Evgeny Kuznetsov, also Anthony Mantha. And that's just off the top of my head. I also kind of heard some interesting comments from Nick Dowd on Breakdown Day about him, where he didn't out and say that he was a horrible coach, but for Anthony Mantha, his success, it is coming from working under Spencer Carberry, who understands Anthony Mantha's style of play, has utilized him correctly, and look at what's happened. He has just shot to the moon. He's at double digits on the Capitals right now in goals, and he's getting it done at a breakneck pace. Mantha now has 5 goals in his last 8 games and 11 points in his last 13 games overall. Anthony Mantha, I mean, if anyone saw that coming, I think that you should open up the FanDuel app and start putting a whole lot more money on games because you saw something that I didn't. I hoped that Anthony Mantha could be more because at the end of the day, I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a good hockey player. He was just snake bitten, but now he's getting results. He reached double-digit goals and now has 10 goals and 5 assists through 27 games. Started the season as a healthy scratch. That was a tough thing. Like, what are we doing? Why do we still got Mantha on this team? He sucked last year. And now, obviously, he's sucking this year because he's a healthy scratch, but he kind of just got it in and said, Anthony, we can do this. We've done this before. Let's just go out there and play consistent, hard hockey and get it done. And that's what's happened. He's had success and just a really great story. And now, when you take a look at it, like I said, one of the better players on the team. I mean, where would the Capitals be minus his 10 goals, 5 assists? Some of those games may have been lost. You take a look at Protas and Mantha, for me, are kind of an unlikely duo, but have great chemistry and ultimately helping drive the Caps train to success. Another one, Alexei Protas, a guy that last camp was really good, but last year kind of bumpy up and down. But Alexei Protas, Anthony Mantha, Connor McMichael, just really bright and shining beacons on this team where you didn't really see it coming. You knew Alexei Protas had potential. You knew that Mantha maybe had potential. But for both of those guys to just be lighting it up, and the young guy, Connor McMichael, doing a great job. Hendricks Lapierre also stepping up admirably in Connor McMichael's absence when he was ill, playing top 6 minutes. That they do have that depth and there is great chemistry. I just think that they need to find the right pieces that fit. Because I think that the Capitals waste a lot of time on guys like Kuznetsov that we know that they are a round peg in a square hole, and it's just not going to work. Sometimes you can get it, maybe a little bit in there, but you need that round peg in the round hole that's a good fit, like an Anthony Mantha, like Alexi Protas. Sometimes you can take that round peg and take a hammer and try to hammer it into that hole, and it fit. It might work for a little while, but ultimately it's not going to work. And I think that the Capitals are lucky, and I think that in a lot of different regards that they're winning, and I think they're doing it on the back of Spencer Carberry, the youngest NHL coach, but has a rapport. I think he knows how to talk to players. I don't think that he's that rough old Peter Laviolette type that is rough around the edges. And the results speak for themselves, as he killed it with the Stingrays, with the Hershey Bears, with the Providence Bruins, with the assistant coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs, that he is a winner. Spencer Carberry is a winner. And I think that if you are a winner and you're not just a guy that's going to go to whatever team that's going to sign you, I mean, Peter Laviolette at this point has been on a lot of teams. And, I suppose his success is why he keeps his jobs in the NHL. But if you look behind the curtain a little bit, you see that he was a rough guy to play under. And Spencer Carberry, for me, and everything that I've heard, all the interviews that I've watched, that I've read, he seems like the players like to play for him. So I think that's behind Anthony Mantha's success, is he's confident, and that he had kind of a change of heart. Like, I know that I struggled last season and I'm struggling to start this season, but I'm going to make a change. And he has made that change. And now he is one of the biggest, most productive players on this team. And for me, I'm super pumped for Anthony Mantha, Alexi Protas, and what this team has to offer after the break here. That I think that the Capitals are just in the beginning phases of it, as we see Max Pacioretty coming back. Ethan Bear is ramping up and ready to come back to this team as well. That there is a lot to be excited about as Capitals fans, and you should be all really excited. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this Christmas Day edition of Locked On Capitals. And I'm so glad that you decided to join me today. It is your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals, and I want to thank all of you that listen year-round. If you're listening on the audio side or watching this on YouTube, when you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 national streaming channel. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.